What was the best worth it detention in school? 11-year-old me thought it would be hilarious to take chicken drumsticks along to music class instead of my actual drumsticks. Bits of chicken flying around a drum kit, a class hysterically laughing, a red-faced angry music teacher, and I later found myself in detention. From memory, no significant damage was caused to the drum kit. It was a ratty-looking thing that had needed heads replacing for many years before 11-year-old me came along anyway. 5 years on from the chicken drumstick incident, I began earning a living from playing drums, but my days of using chicken ended at age 11. 16 years later, people from that class still bring up the chicken drumstick incident in conversation with me. I had a teacher who would not let anyone go to the bathroom the entire year. So, the last month of school, my friends and I got so fed up with it, I decided to take action. I brought an extra change of clothes hidden in my backpack and drank 3 bottles of water at lunch. During class that afternoon, I asked the teacher if I could use the restroom. And of course, she responded with the usual, no. So I said, okay. And just pissed all over myself and the desk. I had an extra change of clothes, so it was only uncomfortable for a little bit. The look on her face was worth it. Now she lets any and everyone go to the bathroom as needed. You're welcome, America. TLDR, pissed all over myself during class at school to make a point to the teacher to let people go to the bathroom during class. I once instigated a whole revolution in my Catholic school. We had a horrible math teacher that nobody liked. When he took vacations, they brought a substitute teacher that was really great. So, we did a petition with signatures from students of all grades for them to keep her as the official teacher. I was the head of the movement, so I went to the principal with the document to show our efforts. She laughed at me and told me to get the hell out of there because students don't have the right to demand such things. I went back to class crying, 7th grade, and my classmates became really angry that the principal had treated me like that. So everyone got out of the class, started to call the other students in all classes to join, and they did. At the end of it, everybody stood at the street in front of the school yelling that the principal was a bitch. I was in serious trouble after that, but totally worth it. I went to a K through 8 Catholic school. Our school lunches were pitifully small, same portion for 1st graders as for 8th graders. The lunch ladies understood that the portions were small and would often let students get second servings, which they were otherwise going to throw out. I went to get some extra salad. Rather than giving me an additional serving, they gave me the remaining heaping mound of cheap iceberg lettuce drenched in Italian dressing. It was seriously probably several pounds of salad. I had no intention of eating the entirety of it, but a teacher caught me eating the leftovers and said I had ought to finish it, otherwise it would be so wasteful. At that point, it became a competition to prove her wrong. I had to stay probably an extra 10 minutes to finish munching down the pile of salad. When I finished, the teacher called me a pig and gave me a detention for some arbitrary reason. I relished in the look of her disgust and gleefully took the detention. After being bullied a lot between the ages of 8 and 14, I finally snapped when, as I was walking away from a bully, he said, "Keep rolling, fat boy," in front of a girl I like. I turned around in a blinding anger and hit him so hard I broke a few bones in my hand and his nose. He fell back and landed in a puddle of mud and started crying. Fast forward to sitting outside the head teacher's office after I was reported for fighting, and out comes my favorite teacher who apparently saw the whole thing and fought in my corner, meaning the only punishment I got was a week's of lunchtime detention. I was never bullied again after that incident, and I wish I had done it sooner. I just wanted to say, as an adult, this is clearly not the correct response to verbal abuse. But that being said, as a 14-year-old boy, the only options I saw at the time was to wait it out until the end of school, 2 to 3 years I think, or start defending myself. It's nice to read that you're not alone in your worst experiences, and I have enjoyed your stories. Lastly, to those asking, nothing happened with my crush. I was still the fat kid, but I like to think I gained some amount of respect after that day. I was a freshman in high school and still a religious virgin. I was asked why I was waiting to have sex until I was married. I answered with several reasons, including that I didn't want to end up with STDs. A nearby girl, who didn't really care for me, assumed I was trying to say that I didn't want to end up like her and threatened to shoot me. I calmly asked her to shut her mouth. Both of us were threatened to be suspended. She cried and asked for forgiveness from the principal. I sat in his office with a straight look on my face, insisting "shut your mouth" was a sufficient response to a death threat. Because she cried and I didn't, I was suspended. She was not. Okay, story time. I went to a strict technical school. Like, you always had to sit at the same spot in the cafeteria, no talking, nothing other than bread and beverages on the table. No schoolwork, laptops, phones. These were just some of the rules during midday. However, Once you were in 5th or 6th year, 17 to 18 years old, you were allowed to leave and were taken off these lists. I went to the secretary of the school one day to discuss some initiatives we were starting in the school in terms of soccer tournaments during the week. He got a call and left the room for 2 minutes. The lunch forms were open on his computers. I took my and some of my friends' names off. Next week, we slipped out of the campus and we were free. It felt like we'd escaped prison. It took them 2.5 months to notice. Longer if it weren't for a new person to be added to our class. I got 1 day of detention in return for 50 days on the loose. Boys, it was worth it. Moved to a new high school which had classrooms that were not laid out in a standard way. They had a no-tolerance tardy policy. Show up to class 30 seconds late? Detention. You're a new kid and can't figure out where the classrooms are. Detention. First day I racked up 7 detentions. Shit keeps going on. I figure out detention in this school is just a 45-minute study hall where I can get my homework done in a quarter of the time it takes me to do at home. And because I played sports, Saturday detentions was waived for me. Now, worst case scenario is that I spent a minimal amount of extra time in school and my homework is done in record time. Guess how my tardiness improved under these circumstances? Principal calls me in at the end of the semester, or year, I forget. He asks me, "Are you trying to wallpaper your house with detention slips?" I explained the situation, which went over well because I had straight A's and no other behavioral stuff. Principal points out that it is literally impossible for me to complete the detentions I have before I graduate. End result, I get excused from ever getting a detention for being tardy for the rest of high school. I was in 8th grade and our gym teacher picked 1 student per class to make his personal bitch. I wasn't having any of it, so everything he tried, I was able to one-up him. His final straw was when we were throwing frisbees and he threw one at me. At the last second, he said, "Sodi, heads up," expecting me to get hit in the face. I don't know how it happened, but without looking, I grabbed it, spun around, and whipped it back at him fast enough and hard enough to give him a bloody nose. He sent me to the principal's office where she was laughing her ass off but had to give me a 3-day suspension due to attacking a teacher. I found out 2 years later that he was fired from his job after that year due to multiple students from several years coming forward and claiming physical and verbal abuse. So it was totally worth it to get that asshole out of teaching. In high school, my dad dropped me off out front after all the buses had left. Vice principal was being an asshole for no reason and giving my dad shit for, quote, parking in a bus lane, which, in fact, he had not violated any rules. It was clear the VP was trying to pick a fight. After a brief heated exchange, my dad drove off, and I heard the VP mutter, "Asshole," under his breath. I stood in front of the building, waited for the VP to turn around and see me, held up a brazen middle finger, and walked inside, ignoring his demands that I stop. I proceeded to dodge detention until I was pulled from class. TLDR, flipped off the vice principal in front of the school. Felt great. Some kid was stealing money out of the locker rooms every day after school while sports teams were practicing. I skipped cross-country practice one day and hid in the shower area in an attempt to catch them. After waiting for over an hour, I finally heard someone enter. I didn't know what I would be up against, so I had taken my belt off for some sort of makeshift weapon. Just made me feel safer. I heard the sound of Velcro separating, and I knew I had finally caught him. I ran out to the locker area, and he flung the wallet in his hands away and immediately pretended to be opening a lock on the locker. The culprit was this tiny 8th grader. Junior high was connected to the high school. As he sat there, fumbling with a lock, I just stood and waited. Finally, when it was clear to him that he wasn't fooling me and that he didn't know the combination of the locker he was trying to open, he looked up at me. I started yelling at him, telling him how many people wanted to kick his ass. The wallet he was trying to open was one of my friends, who was in open gym close by. I told him to wait there unless he wanted trouble, and I got my friend. Unfortunately, we started trying to extort the money he had stolen over the last few weeks with threats, because we were concerned that if we turned him in, we wouldn't see a dime. Finally, the kid turned himself in because he didn't have any of the money left, a way to make the money, and was legitimately concerned we were going to hurt him. The discipline lady said something I'll never forget. "Blank, you just can't do that. I'm glad you did, but you can't take the law into your own hands. I'm sorry, but I've got to give you detention for this." She asked why I didn't turn him in, so I answered her honestly. She asked us to get a list together and made the parents pay up. All in all, totally worth it. TLDR, I caught a kid stealing and extorted money from him rather than turning him in. A teacher I know had a goldfish on his desk. When the class came in for their first day, he gave them a few rules. However, he said that his most important rule was that no one touch his goldfish no matter what. Midway through the year, he begins to teach his students about how laws, whilst upheld by the government, are not always just. During this lesson, he takes the goldfish out of its bowl and throws it on the ground to let it die. My friend, who acted out of instinct, picks up the goldfish and puts it back in the bowl. He was given a detention for his offense, and the detention description said, for doing the right thing. Well, after setting a toilet on fire, the strap just wasn't doing it anymore. So they gave me an in-house suspension. For the unaware, the strap was a leather strap that they whipped the palm of your hands with. Good times. So for a week, I was left alone in a small office. Just me, my homework, and a computer. I knew nothing back then. This was 1989 through 1990. All I knew was some MS-DOS commands they taught me in my technology course and how to navigate directions and stuff. Apparently, that was the server for their fledgling computer network linking them and the school board. Something like that. There was important stuff in there. Anyway, I wiped everything. Transferred to a cooler school 2 weeks later. Girl I had a major crush on passed me a note. Teachers saw the pass and said to bring it to her. I flat out told her no. I was sent to the office, and I read it on the way just in case I had to give it up. The note basically said she was falling in love with me and wanted to know if I felt the same. Worth it. I never lost the note/letter. Yes, we dated, and it was amazing. The sad part is, after her father got a job in another state, and she had to move. We tried to stay connected back then. It was the late 90s, but it ultimately didn't work. It was becoming painful for the both of us, and we just lost contact. A few years ago, I found out she was alive and doing well. I'm happily married to a wonderful woman now, and there's nothing I would do to change that. My ex and I had our time together, and it caused us both to grow emotionally. I don't think I'd be the person I am now, if not for that experience. So, I say it once more, worth it. It was worth it because I learned that the American school system is terrible. You see, if you were a little shit who deviated slightly out of the norm, you get your ass kicked to detention faster than you can say unfair. In detention, they had a kind of rattle box where you would pick out your detention, stuff like garbage pickup, sweeping the cafeteria, etc. So 8th grade me, being an idiot and thinking the Giants would win, I made a bet and lost. The loser had to bring some Windex and wash the windows. I did, got caught, and was sent to detention. As I shuffled around the punishments in the box, I picked one and read it. It was to wash the windows. No joke. So for the crime of washing the windows, I was punished by washing the windows. With the Windex I'd brought, I was pissed. I was given detention because my hair was too long on the first day of my junior year of high school. The admissions director was new, and it was his first day at an all-boys school, and I think he thought he needed to lay down the law. He pulled me aside, and I was mouthy about it, and he almost expelled me. During that detention, he and I talked like normal people, and got along great. We became friends through it. After that, I got away with pretty much everything because he was my friend. We are still friends today, 10 years later. I would say that detention was worth it. In the Netherlands, we have a system whereby when you're late to class, you go to the janitor to get noted down for being late. And this could lead to detention after it happens a couple times. They were categorized into good reasons and poor reasons. Good reasons included bike dysfunctions. I had such a dysfunction once and was late to class given by an old, always annoyed female maths teacher whom was also my tutor for that year. When given the reason, she sent me to the janitor but phoned that the reason was illegitimate, so I was given a piece of paper with late for illegitimate reasons on it to return to the teacher and class in question. I found the situation rather unreasonable at the time, and when I got back, I teared the paper into pieces in front of her and threw it at her in an arch, so some of it hit her face, and the rest came down on her like paper snow. It was a petty act, and I got sent out, plus detention for it. Parents were called, etc. My parents, however, did have a functional brain, and when phoned, just laughed in reply and pointed out that it was, in fact, unreasonable, thus warranting the response. It's no grand thing, and I was usually well behaved, but when something which I perceived to be unreasonable transpired, a reaction appropriate to me at the time was given, leading to detention in a couple different incidents. This one was worth it for the reaction on her face, though. She became known as the Snow Hag for a little while after that. I went to a Jesuit high school, and you were not allowed to dress up for Halloween. My senior year, about half of the class decided we were going to anyway, because why not? So we all met up in the student parking lot and marched together. It was over 100 of us in all types of costumes. I went as a knight. and had a suit of armor made out of cardboard and metallic duct tape and a broomstick horse. We all got detention, but the best part was, at the end of the day, when we all reported to serve, normally detention was held in 1, maybe 2 rooms. But there were so many people that day, they were overwhelmed and had to scramble to find other rooms to put people in and teachers to watch them. I can't remember why, but my yearbook teacher in high school wanted to keep me over the lunch hour for detention when I hadn't brought a lunch, so I had nothing to eat. I said, "Nope," and left his class when the bell rang. He shouted after me kind of angrily, but I ignored him, walked home, and made a sandwich. He called while I was there, but he failed to realize, and I was mildly surprised by my mother backing me up on this, that though I was 16 at the time, I was living very technically as an independent, working 2 jobs, renting my parents' basement, and paying for my own schooling. So my mother told him that she's not dealing with school calls about me, and that he had to speak to me directly to sort it out. He instantly became a lot more civil when I got on the phone with him, and we agreed to have a meeting after school to sort it out. Beat the crap out of the school bully. I was having a shitty morning, and this shithead comes up, rips off my necklace, and walks off like nothing happened. I turn around and bull rush this guy. He's like twice my size, but when hit with 95 pounds of middle school rage at once in the lower back, he goes face down on the floor. I jumped up and down on him a few times and worked up a bit of a tap dance to kick him in the back of the head a bit. Once the teachers break us up, I get sent to detention until my mom congratulates me on winning the fight. All around, totally worth it. The bully never messed with me again. TLDR, beat up a bully, mom bought me ice cream. Okay, so a little background. The teacher was a science teacher for junior high, so he taught 7th to 8th graders. His name was Mr. Butler, and I can honestly say he was the worst teacher I have ever had the displeasure of meeting. He made fun of everyone, including the one kid in my grade that was actually mentally retarded. But enough of that, on to the story. It started out like any other science class. Boring. We talked about space and some other stuff I don't remember, but that's not important. After space, Mr. Butler went on to talk about states of matter. He said there were 3. Me, being the smartass I was, raised my hand and said, no, that's not true. There's 4. They had recently been debating on adding plasma as the 4th state of matter. In front of the whole class, he says, "You know, Sam, no one likes a know-it-all." Immediately after he said that, I fired back, "Is that why nobody likes your class?" I was king of 7th grade that day. I still tell people this story when they talk about ripping on their teachers. 7th grade, 1982. I was sent to the principal's office for some reason or another, nothing detention-worthy. Was left alone to wait for a really long time. Sat there, waiting. Sharpened a pencil for the heck of it. Principal's pencil sharpener was way better than the ones in the classrooms. Was impressed with how sharp it got that pencil, like a dart or something. On an impulse, I threw it like a dart at the clock on the wall, and it stuck perfectly in the heavy paper face. Fast forward to the principal finally walking in to see me launching sharpened pencils at a clock full of holes. "What the heck are you doing?" I don't know how it happened, but without missing a beat, my mouth somehow said, "Just killing time." Wittiest thing I'd ever said. Totally worth the detention, calls to parents, trials and tribulations that followed. When I was a freshman, we had to go to an assembly for the senior class president and other positions. One of the dudes running for president was rumored to have an enormous penis, like a real-life knee slapper. Anyway, everyone else running gave 10 to 15-minute speeches about how they'd improve the school, blah, 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 blah. These were a big deal at my school, and the speeches were always very carefully planned and thought out. People didn't try to be funny. So this kid gets up to the podium, looks around, leans close to the microphone, and says, "The rumors are true." He walked away with the most absurd amount of confidence I've ever seen, as a full gymnasium of kids 14 to 18 either laughed, gasped, or, in the case of some girls, literally swooned. He won, but after that, we didn't get to do speeches anymore. We had a group come to the school and teach us about the effects of global warming. Our school was seriously eco-conscious. One of the ladies talking on stage started to get emotional when talking about how polar bears had to travel farther and farther to get food, resulting in a lower population and possibly becoming endangered. It started to get really awkward when she got choked up about it. I piped up in the audience and said something along the lines of, "Why should I care? They keep drinking all my Coca-Cola."